Okay, so I think we are live.
Hey, Cindy. Yeah.
How are you?
So today
Oh,
we're talking about budget travel.
yeah. So this one, okay. So I think we are. Ooh, I'm got a little echo here. We're talking about traveling and spending how you spend your money when you're actually on the trip. And we're not going to talk about the airfare and the lodging, right? Because those are the two things that we thought could like warrant its own session
Oh,
altogether,
yeah,
like how to get
exactly.
economic airfare. And that's always changing. So we'll definitely do a session on both of those. They're the biggest expenses when you're traveling. But for us today, we just wanted to talk about like once you actually get there and you're walking around and you're trying to do your trip and you've maybe purchased your tickets and you know where you're staying, how do you keep the rest of the costs down
Yeah,
and still have
exactly.
a good time?
Yeah. Things like food, things like sightseeing and tours, and even state park entrance fees, and just getting around. I mean, all of these things cost money. So we want to
Yes.
share some of our little hacks and tips on how you can do that and have actually a better time. I mean, it's a lot of what Cindy and I talk about often is if you sometimes are forced to make, go with the local instead of the organized trip, you're going to like have such a better experience.
Yes, yeah. It forces you to like step out of your bubble and actually do stuff with locals instead of with the tour trip, right? Or the group, where you're just with other travelers versus with your local people and actually communicating with them and connecting with them in a way. So let's just start. I think the first thing on our list was eating. Is that right? We were going to talk
Yeah,
about
I've got
food.
eating. Yeah, food.
Yeah. So we've done a whole session where we talked about eating al fresco. You and I both do that, where we're talking about picnicking, eating out, bagging your lunch, basically.
Right.
And
I think it comes down to, there may be that gem place that you want to eat, that you want to go and you want to spend the money there, but then you need to balance it. I always talk about balance. I mean, every meal, unless you have like unlimited budget, which I never have, um, you know, cut money by, eating outside, picking up some sandwiches and eating by the waterfall, eating by the covered bridge, eating even in the
yes,
little park in the middle of town. I mean, you'll see other people out having lunch, you'll have a conversation with a family. It's so
yes,
much better.
it'll so much change it. And also, I think it's more. I mean, a lot of people talk about gaining weight when they're on vacation because you eat a lot, and that's because you're eating like these big course heavy meals for every all three meals all the time. And because you feel, I mean, we do, I don't know about in all countries in the world, but you often feel weird where I just want a cup of coffee and a piece of toast, and you walk in and you
Yeah.
feel strange just ordering something small or not ordering a meal because they think you came to a restaurant for a meal, which is what most restaurants are there for, is to serve you an entire meal. At home you may just have coffee and toast, or at lunchtime you might just have like a soup or something super small, not a big meal. And so that's
Right.
how you're used to eating. Unfortunately, when you're out of your element and you don't have a kitchen, which is another point we can talk about, but where you have to eat at restaurants, you find yourself overeating, eating things you don't need. You're also wasting time. You and I've talked about that a little bit.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
So much time is wasted sitting and waiting for the check, where you could be walking around doing something else. And you just needed
Right.
nourishment, right? You just needed like
Yeah,
a bite or two to
exactly.
eat and keep
Right.
going.
And I've seen too many times when you did take advantage of maybe going on that bus trip that's taking you many places, like through Europe. They only give you X amount of time off, maybe in a wonderful place. But in Europe too, it's like, don't even bother going and sitting down there at lunch. You're going to miss your whole hour, hour and a half
To
that you could
walk
have
around.
walk around
Yeah.
the city and get some pictures and get a feel for that fabulous place that then you would think, yeah, I want to come back here later. But if you spent your whole time on at lunch, you get back on the bus, then you realize I didn't even get to see that city at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Learning how to like just like think about your alfresco meals in a different way. I could probably do a whole session because
I
I
think so.
definitely um when I was traveling was like I would buy food that would specifically last long periods of time, that I could have multi-purpose, like I could use it for this and for this. Cheese is an excellent thing, something that will last a while that actually has some nourishment. And so things that you can, buy and eat today and eat tomorrow, and you can have for breakfast and lunch,
Yeah.
or they mix up and do. Potatoes are fantastic. It's a very versatile food if you have a kitchen. Um, and so just figuring out like how you can shop without buying stuff for like a week. You only need stuff for like the next 24 hours in this place that you're
Right.
at, and you need enough stuff to have a sandwich, but you don't need a whole loaf of bread, for example.
Yeah,
Right? So there's
exactly.
ways to navigate a little bit of that. We could, as again, probably talk a little bit about that. So much fun about doing that. And it also makes you think. I mean, if you're going to do the alfresco dining and have a picnic when you're in Paris, which by the way is one of my favorite places to do that
Yeah.
at, right? Then you stop, like you start looking at like the little grocery stores or the little markets, and you're stopping to pick up stuff, and you're planning and plotting, and it just changes the whole way you look at the city, right? Because now I'm like, I actually have a mission. I'm not just looking at pretty things, but now I want to go
Right,
inside and
exactly.
look at the
Right.
store. What kind of food you got, and what's
Yeah.
this? And so lots of good ways to change how we eat. So the picnic is one thing. And then we were talking about self-cooking. I do try to find lodging that allows me to cook, right?
Yes.
At the very minimum, there's a microwave to rewarm something from last night.
Right. Or even make like oatmeal in the morning,
Right.
or take some soup packets in your bag. There's a lot of things that you can pick up once you land and get
Mhm.
somewhere and pop into a market, so that you can make some meals right there, in the morning. Maybe at the end of the day, even maybe you don't want that big heavy meal. You've
Yeah.
been out, you full, you want to get your sleep, whatever it is, or go to a music event, and so you just want, you just want
Just
a
you don't
little
want a whole,
something. Yeah.
yeah, you just want to go back. You spend your time, as you said, restaurant meals take so much time.
They
So
really
if you're really
do.
having a good time, it's like, I'll just go back to the, to the hotel and warm up that soup, because that's all I really needed. I'd much rather
Yeah.
spend my daylight hours out and looking at stuff and doing things. And that's not to say that there aren't amazing restaurants, and maybe you want to have one great meal, or there's several great meals you want to do. There's a different style of traveling for everyone, but you do not have to spend, all of your money on restaurant meals, 3 meals a day when you're out. And if you go look at that budget cost for that, that's a lot.
It
It may
is.
sound crazy, but, and I know you do this too, like I bring coffee with me because I have to have my coffee.
Yeah.
And I don't always want to spend several dollars, whatever that happens to be in the local area, to get a cup of coffee. So being able to make coffee with me in the room is helpful. But I also bring oatmeal. I also bring a few other things, sometimes, especially on a shorter trip. If my trip is under 7 days, I probably have a little like
Oh,
food
yeah.
kit that I
Right.
bring along,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I am planning not to go out for every meal. I'm just going to plan to have a couple of snacks like bars or something for breakfast, or and have a big pancake breakfast somewhere else, right?
Right, exactly. Right. And it's just like planning that out. And if you're traveling with someone else, maybe, talking about that, like, hey, I'm just going to grab, make something in the room. I'm going to make, my
Right.
oatmeal, have my coffee. I do that all the time, because that's one area where you can save a lot of money. I mean,
You can.
$3, $4 on each coffee. I'd be, that's a whole meal by the end of the trip. I mean, that's a whole
Yeah.
bag of
Well,
groceries
a
or
10-day
something.
trip, $4 a day, $40.
Yeah.
That's a gift you
Right.
could bring home, or a lovely meal somewhere else that
Yeah.
you could have
Right.
had for that $40. And so self-cooking, and it's not always possible, but it is usually worth I just dropped Sheila off at the airport, and we were talking about hotels, and it's always worth that little bump, I think, if you're staying very long, if they have a little kitchenette in the room,
Yes. Yeah,
because that will
exactly.
cut down on how many times you have to go out to eat. And then when you do go out to eat, right, you have that. They serve big meals, and you're like, there's leftovers, and if you're in a hotel, it's like, I don't really feel comfortable taking this back, because how am I going to warm up this baked potato that's left over, which would be
Yeah.
fantastic tomorrow, but it's not cold. So having just a little bit of that also stretches those dollars a little bit. You have that fantastic meal, and you can have it tomorrow.
Right,
Split
exactly.
it.
And yeah, and that's a good tip too, is don't assume every lodging has hotels. I have run into a couple states, and I don't know if it's that whole safety issue, that not even in some of the chain hotels in certain states, I've bumped into it, where they don't put a microwave in each and
Right.
every room. They may have a community microwave as
Nice.
such down in the what they call their breakfast area, or their
Right.
area that they serve everybody. But that's a question you might want to put on your list. Or maybe if you're traveling with your family or friends, don't assume there's a microwave, because it is nice to have your own microwave in your room. I can't tell you, I use it all the time. So
Me too. Yeah. Warm up water, warm up something, warm up yesterday's leftovers. Yeah.
yes.
It's really nice. And sometimes they have some of that that's not super available. You might just ask them, especially if
Yeah.
you're in a boutique hotel. They're like, oh yeah, we have some stuff. You're welcome to use it if you want.
Right.
So you just have to ask those questions, which will absolutely help, navigate that. Let's see. We talk about, street
Street
food. There we
food.
go.
Yep. Street
Love
food is
street
a
food.
great food way to save money because you're not sitting down oftentimes. There's this
Yes.
little stand and maybe they have a limited menu, but you get a taste of what's local, it's quick, it's ready to go, and it's a great experience. And now you've interacted with another local that you might just ask, or they'll ask you, they'll recognize that you're not a regular at lunchtime. Where are you
Right.
from? What are you doing? You can say, hey, I'm here, and what is there to see? And oftentimes, just by opening that conversation, you'll get the
Yeah.
rest of the other amazing
Yeah.
things to see or
Yeah.
do.
And like you said, that can be your al fresco dining. Like you didn't pack anything, but you're just going to walk up and get the whatever's in the street food. And we talk about when we've done that session that we pack along like napkins and things,
Yeah.
your own silverware and stuff. Like I just store some of that little stuff in my purse all the time, so then I can just go sit down somewhere and spread out my little bandana tablecloth, and I can eat my little meal, and it's cool. Even though I just paid $4 for it on the street, I made myself a
Yes.
mini little picnic, and I feel really cool about that. And you're right, that's also another way to meet locals. I'm remembering a story of, I don't remember I must have been when we were in Vietnam. I didn't know what the food was. We saw all the food, on the street vendor on their little cart. And I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know what to order, but it smelled so good. And I literally just walked up, and there was somebody in front of me, and she ordered some stuff, and she turned around, and I'm like, and I walked up, and he says, what do you want? And I go, whatever she had. I have no
Right,
idea.
exactly.
Just give me whatever was on her plate. Like that looks
Exactly.
great.
I've done
And
that so many
yeah.
times.
And it
Right.
started this great conversation, both with him as well as the woman who was like, she was telling me what it was. I was like, I don't know what to call it. I don't know the name of it, but it looks really, really good.
Right. And it's
So
just like going to
yeah,
Maine, everyone wants to eat the lobster. Well, you go to order the lobster in the sit-down restaurant. Sometimes you're paying twice as much, whereas if you just go to a
right.
little stand, a little lobster shack, they call it, you get an amazing meal just that's fabulous. You can sit outside and
Right.
you really get to interact with more
Yes.
people, and you have maybe a fabulous view because in the sit-down restaurant, those prime tables by the window go quick. They make
Right.
reservations for months. I mean, it's
Yep.
a win-win on the street food.
It is. And if you bring your little, I mean, that's my big plus. I'm sure people think I'm crazy, but I bring my little bandana, my little tablecloth, and my little silverware. I mean, I look like I'm, setting up my little shop there, but I don't care because I'm going to make it.
Nope.
I'm in Paris. I'm in another location. I even did it in New York a couple times. I brought my little thermos with hot chocolate. And
Yeah.
it's just like, you guys are all missing out. Like, this
Yeah,
is
exactly.
fantastic. I get to
Exactly.
sit out and watch. I was at Brant Park, I think, and watch people ice skate. They were ice skating.
Oh,
And it was
nice.
like, instead of just sitting and watching and getting a Starbucks coffee, I had brought my own hot chocolate, my own little pastry that I had bought the
Yeah.
night before. And I set up my table, and I'm sure people thought I was a little wonky, but whatever. I had a great time. It was a
No, it's
beautiful
fabulous.
scenery. So there
Yeah.
are tons of great ways to save money on eating. And that's a big
Yes.
thing. I mean, if you think about, even if you were budgeting for like, what, $10 for breakfast and at least $10 to $15. If you do $15 for every meal, lunch and dinner, that's 30, it's 40, that's $40 a day.
Yeah.
And
40 to
10
50
days
dollars is a day easy per
for
person.
like very
Yeah.
little. I mean, you can't go out to a nice restaurant for $20 or $15. Like that's still the basics. So you might as well get the basics of the street food and have a giggle time talking to
Yeah,
somebody.
right, right.
Just change that, and you get to connect with the locals. So hope we've given you guys some ideas there. What was our other topic? We're talking about, sightseeing, right?
Sightseeing, yeah, what you want to do during the day. And there's so many great ways to find fun things to do. There's a couple organizations, even free tours on foot, tours
Yes.
by locals. These are often in some of the larger cities, but you might want to just go to their website and check. You might be surprised. I was looking the other day in Oklahoma for stuff, and it was amazing. There's
Yeah.
locals doing these things, Airbnb experiences, even if you're not going to stay in the Airbnb,
They
oftentimes
still have
they
experiences.
still have experiences.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think tours by foot, the way that is run is it's free. and pay what you want. So
Right,
we'll do
right.
tip, and you can pay or you cannot pay. And so if you're on a budget, you can just simply choose not to pay. The other, I know that Free Tours by Foot also has some self-guided tours. So you might look at some of their websites and some other places where you can find a self-guided tour. So you can just print it all out before you leave or get it on your phone. And as you walk around, read the history. And if there's a couple of people, you guys can take turns being tour
Yeah.
guide. I've done that with my kids where I was like, you're the tour guide, you read the narration today.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And what is it that we're looking at, and we learn a little bit about it. So that can be, you don't even need a tour guide necessarily if you pick one of those self-guided ones, but
And there are some apps out there too, I've
yes,
noticed, that are popping up. So definitely, even in places that aren't, like I said, Paris or some of these big cities,
right,
made little apps. Somebody's gone around and you can download it on your phone, just like you suggested. And I've recently come across quite a few. There'll be,
yeah,
there might be a theme, whether it's,
yeah,
you know, graffitis, street art,
yes,
or
street
there might
art.
be history sites. So you can really, pick a mix of different topics and again, have fun with someone and go on your own. If you're there by yourself, it's a great activity, kind of a treasure hunt. Go find the
Go
places.
find the stuff. Exactly. Yeah. And then we were talking about like using Facebook groups and other like online places to find out what to do and what to see. There's a lot of Meetup is a great opportunity. I'm sure there's other websites or organizations like that, but Meetup does local things. I've joined, just messaged the Meetup organizer who's having like a woman's wine tasting. I don't live in that area. I just let them know I'm coming into town and I'd like to join you for one day. They love having a guest
Oh,
appearance,
exactly.
and you get to do that. Or, you could choose to go for a run or a hike with the local community. Any of those kinds of things might be fun for you and an opportunity to meet locals. And it doesn't cost anything. It's just the cost of the meal or whatever
Right.
you're
And if it's
doing.
a right, and if you're concerned about safety or something too, there's many meetup groups that are travel oriented just for women. So you could
Yeah.
look for like a tours by women or whatever. And if they've got, like, I know you're hosting a walk this Sunday
Yeah.
in Los Angeles. I mean, you'd be happy if someone was a visitor and
Yeah.
wanted to join in. And what a
Sure.
great way to discover the city in a different way. And it's low cost. You
Yeah.
meet others, and then depending on how the walk goes, maybe you met a friend to have lunch with the next
Yes.
day. I mean, who knows? So,
I've made some good friends on some of those events with Meetup, just because people come and they're looking to connect as well. So it's
right.
a great place. We also talked about what the civic organizations. I know you have some ideas about doing that and where to find.
Yeah, exactly. When I'm planning a trip somewhere, definitely go to the state website. They have free travel guides, free maps, just all of that kind of information. And oftentimes, just by opening up that map, you find like state parks you wouldn't have discovered on your own
Right.
that might be more cost effective than paying to go into a national park. A lot of those national parks have upped their prices.
Right.
Um, Also just reaching out, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, oftentimes they have a
Mhm.
website, or I've actually called oftentimes, just make the phone call and
Yeah.
say, hey, I'm coming to town. I'm bringing some friends. I'm bringing my family, and we're looking for some low cost things to do. And they might be like, oh yeah, there's a historic organization, or the
Right.
library often has like weekend activities that are free, or maybe, like you said, very low cost or by donation only. So
Yeah. Libraries are great. And most of the civic in most cities, even the smallest little
yes.
podunk town around America, you will find that their city hall or their courthouse has a tour day. Now,
Yes.
those tour days might be kind of geared for, like, I've been to my mom and I did this a couple of times where we went to a different city and just asked for the courthouse tour. And they're kind of geared to like high school students or maybe college students to see, because they're like looking for employment and looking at career opportunities. But they talk about the architecture, the history of the building. You might just get a real good piece of information, and most likely whoever's leading your tour is a local, and most
Right.
likely they love their city. Otherwise they're probably a volunteer, great person to meet. I love even here in LA, I mean, we have a beautiful central library and they
Oh,
do tours
yeah.
down there. But the people who run those are amazing people. They know a lot about the city because they're fascinated by it. So
Yes.
there's somebody to like connect with and do that. And our city hall also does a tour, and those are free. There's like, it's done every Tuesday or whatever. So check that out before you go to see. So instead of paying for like a big architecture tour of the city. You
Right.
could actually kind of self do that, like go to the library, do that free tour, and the next day do the civic building free tour. And you might find that you've covered a big portion of the city just by picking up the local stuff. And this,
Yeah.
they have access. Also, I noticed that they have access to things that the other people don't, because the people at the
Right.
city hall have access to rooms and buildings that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise, and stuff like that. So really cool stuff to venture out into the state. And
Even universities and
yes.
colleges, they're often running tours because they're wanting students to come to the campus. They're wanting to show it off, especially during summertime. But again, you got to reach out ahead of time to find out what days, or if you can just contact. Sometimes they
Mhm.
do them on demand, so to speak, or
Yeah.
if they have enough interest, or if they have a student, because oftentimes it's a student doing those or an
Mhm.
upperclassman. And again, you'll get access to these beautiful campus buildings. You'll find out something about the city and the community because that's what they're trying to promote,
Mhm.
and you'll just have an incredible time.
Mhm. And then I think we didn't write this one down, but as we're talking, I'm like, and then there are also like businesses like in that
Yes.
city, if they have a factory, or
Yes.
like if there's a big business that's that particular city or area is known for, reach out to them, because wouldn't it be cool to see, like how chocolate is made, or what they do with
Right.
cereal, or whatever it is like this particular city is known for, our brewery, for God's sakes, like look how we do
Breweries,
those, or
cheese.
wineries, cheese.
Yeah.
And they're
I know in Colorado, Celestial Seasonings was doing a tour, so you can go through their plant, sample their
mhm.
tea. So yeah, there's a lot of those.
Yeah, and even in little small towns, I know there was I think it was a dairy that my mom and I went to, and they
Oh,
had a
nice.
whole, like, they were again kind of geared to children, like education on how milk and cheese is made and so forth. But I was just fascinated, and they had an afternoon tour, and it was free because they're hoping to get people to come to their facility and then buy their
Right.
wares, right, to buy the product.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you don't need anything. You just have to stand behind the 8-year-old who's excited about seeing
Yeah,
a cow for the first
exactly.
time, and I'm just like, what do you do with the cheese? Right. So
Yeah,
really cool stuff. And that's really low cost and tons of fun. And
that's a lot of fun, and
those
yeah,
are fun.
those are a lot of fun, exactly. I think we also mentioned we already talked about the parks and recreation, um,
Yes.
and asking locally. I mean, if you're
Right.
gonna we Cindy and I love to stay local, but that doesn't stop from making those phone calls and inquiring,
Mhm.
look up, a bed and breakfast, get someone on the phone. If it's not a busy time, if it's the middle of the day when they're not as busy, if it's not a Saturday, they'll often have time to chat for a few minutes and give you suggestions or recommendations. The chain hotels sometimes are good for going to their website because they'll often list local things in the area too. And
Yeah,
you can
that
just
is.
use that as a guide. You don't even have to stay there. You just,
Yeah, you can just use their tool, but just asking someone at the coffee shop, at the bar, at the restaurant, wherever you're at, and just like, where do you guys go? What are some of your favorite spots? I know I was telling you the story just before we got on about the Grand Canyon. So we had been
yeah,
there with my kids, and we'd already seen most of the stuff that's on the tour book, and we were at breakfast having, big pancake breakfast with the kids, and we just kind of leaned over to this other guy who was sitting next to us and asked, like, where do you go to see the canyon? Because he's lived there all his life.
right.
Because we'd already done the walk up there, go to the spot, all the lookouts and so forth. But he said there's a famous lookout, which is a fire lookout. It's a tower that you run up, and he's a lot of the high school kids go there that live locally, and that's where they hang out, and to see the Grand Canyon. And he like just took a piece of paper and scribbled out directions. There's no streets, and told us where to go, and we had the best time, and it cost zero to go there. We would
Right.
never have known about it had we not asked someone locally. So just striking up those conversations to find these like secret spots, like I have a list. Matter of fact, I'll have to dig it out and maybe post it here. I have a list of things to ask, because
Yeah.
things like asking them, like, where would they take their first date in high school? Like, what's famous places that people take? Like,
Right.
those kinds of questions to ask a stranger will get them thinking. Because if you just ask them the big question, like, what should I see? It's too
It's
broad.
too
So I,
broad, right?
yeah, so I kind of developed a series of questions to help me get people to be inspired to tell me things.
Right.
And so that's definitely one of them. Like ask somebody where they would take a date in high school, or where did their
Yeah.
parents first take them out to eat, or like what's their best memory for that kind of thing. So then you go, oh, that's a real local place. Like that's
Yes,
definitely someplace that's
exactly.
down there.
Right, right.
So yeah, asking locals is by far the best, but it takes a little courage, and you got to hit on the right person who's going to,
And you
you
got to
know,
just be
open up
open.
and
I
tell
mean,
you,
just
right?
open. A lot of times, I've told the story too. I was walking around Charleston with a few photographers and we were admiring someone's flowers outside. And pretty soon the door popped open and this lady just said, she kind of, at first we thought she was going to say, "What are you doing?" I mean, that's the common thing. Why are you photographing my house, my plants, whatever it is?
Right.
But no, in
Invasion.
this case, she was like, "Oh, you like what I did?" She's like, "Come on in. I want to show you how these homes are laid out. This is a historic home, and blah blah blah. And you won't see these private gardens. There's so many of them in cities like Paris or Charleston, and you can't get into these gardens except if they're on a private tour or something like that." But this woman literally, just because we were curious and open, well, at first we were hesitant. She's like, "No, come on in. I want to show you." And sure enough, she walked us to the back and let us photograph in her private garden in the back. So,
Wow. Yeah. So it helps to just be like open to that
and
conversation
curious,
and
exactly.
curious. Absolutely. So there's some good tips for that. The last thing we want to talk about is getting around, moving around once you get there. So get out and walk. That's number one. I think everybody already knows that, and don't be afraid to do that. Walking your distance. I do know that if you're in a neighborhood or a city or a place you're not familiar with, doing that Google Maps where you drop yourself down on the street and walk it a little bit before you go kind of gives you a feel, is this a street I could walk on? Not a
Right.
bad thing to do, just to make sure you feel comfortable. And also asking a local about the neighborhoods, like where do they walk? Where would they think that we should feel safe? But yeah, just keeping yourself out there. And I know, April, you do a lot of self-driving tours where you guys drive yourself. That's also economical. There's the
Right,
cost of the
right.
rental car, but if start to,
You split it. The other thing to do though is really think about your trip as a whole.
right,
I know a lot of times when I'm talking to people about planning to go to New England, yes, you're going to spend some time in some cities, so maybe you can save yourself some costs. I mean, Boston, for one, you do not want to have a car. So
mhm,
spend your first few days in Boston or the last few days and then rent the car when you're
right,
ready to leave. So those first few days, why
already
are you
got it.
paying to store your car in a sense when the best way to navigate Boston is on foot, hop on, hop
Yes.
off bus, or if you're going to use what some other means, why are you also paying to pay for that rental car to have a spot? Just wait and use that on the days you actually really need it.
That's a really good tip. And also the bonus there is that most of the time, I won't say this is exclusively true, but most of the time renting the car at the airport is at least
Yes.
15% more. So in most large hotels or cities have local rental car spots within the city. So if you don't have one, if you're not at a major hotel, if you're at a smaller boutique hotel, that doesn't mean you can't go down the street to the Hilton and
Right.
rent the car there, because they have it there. I've absolutely done that. Or they might have just a neighborhood rental place, but that the rental rate there will be a lot less than it will be at the airport, because you're paying for the convenience of having it there at the airport. And you're absolutely right about like just why are you paying to rent the car
Yes.
and to park it? Like those two things, right? Both of those things
Right.
are happening and you're not actually using it. You'll have a better experience if you need to get in a taxi once or twice. It still
Yeah.
probably economically makes more sense to do that
Right.
if you need to go too far. And then when you mentioned the hop on, hop off buses, we talk about that a lot, that those are great deals. They're really good for a new city if you've never been somewhere. Really great to pay for that to get on and off and just get from one end to the other. It allows you to get off your feet and save your feet.
Yeah, exactly. And also like your first day, if you're new to
Yes.
Paris, if you're new to London, whatever city, Boston, I'm sure too, it kind of gives you the lay of the land. And on that first day, just getting your bearings and then pointing out things like, hey, I want to come back here later, or let's go back there. And
Yeah.
oftentimes that's a great way to kind of pinpoint places you want to spend more time at, or get off there and then you know that you can just pick it up and continue on and see what else
Yeah,
is out
I
there.
was gonna say, I think the first advice I would give is make time and just do the whole loop. Like,
Yes.
don't even get off, just get on and make that a commitment. We're staying on it till we go all the way around, and then we're gonna do it, because you can always do, like, again, you can take a bus or walk or take a taxi to the other place you wanted to see. But the beautiful thing of the hop on, hop off bus is they take you this long distance to all the like key sites,
Yes,
basically. So whatever
exactly
those key
right.
sites are, we definitely did that in Washington, D.C., because it's a long haul to get from one end of the mall to the other and all of those places.
Right.
So it was great, just hop on and let it take us around the loop. And then the second time we got off, and it was much
Oh
easier to
yeah.
navigate because now we know what to do. And then you can decide if it makes sense to buy another ticket. But the one day for sure, those are good. And then some places, I know you mentioned they have free buses, and there's lots of
Yes.
places that have free shuttles, right?
And
Find
you
out
don't
about those.
always and find out about them, because I know when I went to Charleston, sometimes you don't know about them. You see the public transportation bus, which public transportation buses, I know you've used them in LA, everywhere, Cindy, and
Yeah.
those are great too. We talk about that a lot. The tickets are cheap and inexpensive.
Mhm.
But oftentimes, right there at the front desk, we asked the lady something about taking the public transportation. She's like, "Well, if you're just in the historic area here, there's a free bus, and you can just get on right literally across the street." And so that became a great way to, again, the end of the day, your feet are done.
Right.
We had the map with us and we'd be like, okay, we can just walk another couple blocks, wait at the stop, the free
No, take
buses
us right
come
back.
around and it picks us up and it'll take us back to our hotel. It was
Yay.
fabulous. But you got to know to ask or say something.
Yes.
Because
And the Chamber of
honestly,
Commerce is a good person to ask first at the city, like if they have that there. I know Seattle used to have free public transportation. I don't know if it's still the case, but public transit, their buses and everything were free during commuter hours.
oh,
So like
yeah.
between like 5 and 7 to get people to take them home from work and so forth. But I would travel up there for work. So we would use them for happy hour. It was like, you get where, let's go to the happy hour that's further away because we can't walk to. We'll use the
Right.
bus. And then we just have to be done. Happy hour is done at 7. We'll come back closer to the
Right.
hotel for dinner. So we like navigate that so we can get on the free bus. But and I know even locally here, there's a couple of like little shuttles that operate during lunch hours to
Yes. Yeah.
people who are working in the city to get around the city to maneuver. Like a lot of people here in LA don't know about the Dash system.
Right.
The Dash system is downtown and it initially started that way. Now they operate longer hours, but it used to be pretty much during lunch
It
hours.
was.
But it was to get people that are working downtown from one end of downtown to the other quickly enough so they could eat lunch.
Right.
And so forth. So there's lots of that, lots of places that you can get free buses and stuff. And then don't be afraid to do public transportation.
No, by all means, it's great. Oh my gosh, we had such a great time talking to the locals on the bus, people that
Yeah,
live there. And they'd even say, so hey, where are you guys going today? What do you want to,
right.
what are you thinking about seeing? And we'd say something, they'd be like, oh, well, there's another little park, or,
Yeah.
again, something we wouldn't have thought of or known where to go if they hadn't pointed it out.
Yeah, and you can get quite a distance on public transportation because again, it's set up for commuters, it's set up for local people to get to work. So, and it might take some phone calls. And what I've learned also like the 2022 is that years ago when I used to take public transportation, there was no like online system to navigate. Like you couldn't put in 2 addresses and it would tell you
Nope.
what bus. You had to like find the map or call. I used to have to call. Like that's what I had to do. I would call the bus company and go, this is where I want to go. And the women on the phone or the man on the phone would help me figure out how to navigate.
Yeah.
Well, that service is still there, turns out, and nobody uses it anymore because they're all online. So if you call that service, you're going to get a lot more customer service because they're like, oh, this is my whole job is to help you.
I
You're
know.
only the
Yeah.
third call today, like
Right.
it's really
Exactly.
sweet and kind and super helpful. And I know I got stuck downtown years and years ago without knowing like how to get home. And that's what I did. I just called and I'm like, I don't know what bus is the quickest to get home and which buses was late are running. And she was super helpful. And I told her where I was standing and she's like, no, I think you need to be across the street. And I was like, okay, it says this on the thing. And they were super patient and helpful. So don't be shy about trying public transportation and reaching out for help. Most of the time, the bus drivers or whoever's operating will help you. Sometimes
Yeah.
they're a little short because
Yeah,
they've probably been
right.
driving for a long time. But I've also found that like locals, I, as a local here in LA, I always help people if they get on the bus and they're like asking someone, how do I get here? I'll be like, come over, tell me where you want to go.
Right.
Let me open my phone up. Let me help you find it. It's over here. There's plenty of people like myself and others in the world to help you navigate.
Oh,
And
definitely.
it's fun.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's fun. And you have a conversation. And like I said, you'll discover places that you wouldn't have normally found. And it's so
Right.
economical. It gets you out
Right.
and
And
there's
it
that sense of accomplishment with you, of course, too. I
well,
did
it
it.
changes your like cost breakdown also. Like one, you're having an experience, and then two, you're not taking an expensive taxi or an Uber or Lyft, which those are getting a little more pricey lately, but they, used to be really cheap to go Uber or Lyft most places, and most countries have them as well. But again, if you're in a bus with multiple people, there's a lot
Yeah.
more color happening there, a lot more excitement, interesting things and conversations. So that I think is really fun. Do we cover? I think we covered.
I,
I'm going back
we
to
have everything that we covered on our list. Did we have anyone pop in any questions or?
yeah, I have, there's some folks watching. I don't see any immediate questions, but I'm gonna go back there. And if anybody has any questions, let us know. And, we really just, I know you mentioned it at the top of the discussion that, changing and doing some of these things is going to change your experience, right? It's going to
Right, right.
bring you closer to locals, closer to the culture. It's going to force you to get out of your tourist bubble and become a traveler and no longer be, the one
And
that's
try some
observing.
right, and trying something new and just I mean, that sense of discovery is fabulous. I mean,
It's the whole reason we
it's
do
the
it.
whole reason we do it. I mean, I can't tell you how many stories of, just being in New England and, I've you see, you know where the major things are, the
Right,
major routes, but on a Saturday, everyone's taking that scenic drive on a great day. So
right.
when someone can point out something different that fewer people, hey, let me tell you how to go up
Right.
this road, there's just as many beautiful trees and you can come circle back down this way and get to your small town.
Yeah.
It's just eye-opening and you'll have a whole different experience and it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Absolutely. So there's a handful of people watching. I saw that Mary said she also brings coffee packs for her morning, which is great. I'm sure we're not alone in our desire to bring coffee or tea to make sure you have it because good God, you don't want to be without it.
I know,
Um,
yeah.
but it would be great if you're listening or watching the recorded session of this. Tell us what you do. Tell us some of your tips because we always learn something from other folks. And I'm always looking for ways to make my trip as economical as possible so I can go again and stay longer. Right.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. Drop your tips, comments, give it a like.
Yeah, and
Hope
subscribe
you'll
so you can catch us next time we go live. We're trying to do more lives and give you more tips and suggestions. So if you subscribe, you'll get notified when we do it next time. So,
yeah. All right.
all
Thanks
right.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.